السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. آپ سب کو صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد. آپ سب کو ولادت امام حسن عسکری بہت بہت مبارک ہو. اسی کا آغاز کرتے ہوئے میں جناب یحییٰ رضا کو بلانا چاہوں گا کہ وہ آ کے تلاوت قرآن پیش کریں.
محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. بر محمد وعلى محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
اسی کے ساتھ میں گزارش کرنا چاہوں گا جناب ڈاکٹر حسن عباس سے کہ وہ آ کے اپنا کلمہ پیش کریں. بر محمد وعلى محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
نہ خسروی کے لیے ہے نہ افسری کے لیے. نہ خسروی کے لیے ہے نہ افسری کے لیے. زبان باقی ہے بس مدح ہے عسکری کے لیے. اگر نہ ملتی انہیں نور عسکری کی زکات، اگر نہ ملتی انہیں نور عسکری کی زکات، ترستے چاند ستارے بھی روشنی کے لیے. گرایا آپ کا روضہ جنہوں نے مولا، گرایا آپ کا روضہ جنہوں نے شکار پہلے بنیں گے وہ آخری کے لیے. امام پھر سے بلا لیں بسامرا امام پھر سے بلا لے مجھے بسامرا ترس رہی ہے جبھی کب سے بندگی کے لیے میرے امام کا ہمسر وہ کیسے لاتے بھلا میرے امام کا ہمسر وہ کیسے لاتے بھلا ملا نہ جب کوئی قمبر کی ہم سری کے لیے یہ بولے دار پہ میں سوں میں کیسے رک جاؤں یہ بولے دار پہ میں سوں میں کیسے رک جاؤں زبان دی ہے مجھے جب علی کے لیے علی کو دیکھ کے بالی پہ میں پکاروں گا علی کو دیکھ کے بالی پہ میں پکاروں گا اے میری موت ٹھہر جا تو دو گھڑی کے لیے مجھے ہے فخر کہ میں کے در کا نوکر ہوں ہمیں ہے فخر کہ ہم ان کے در کے نوکر ہیں فرشتے خود جہاں آتے ہیں نوکری کے لیے محمد والے محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم
ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات چند اشعار کے سامنے پیش ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات وہ نور جس کو شاہ مشرقین کہتے ہیں وہ نور جس کو شاہ مشرقین کہتے ہیں اسی کو نور خدا نور عین کہتے ہیں اسی کو نور خدا نور عین کہتے ہیں. بکھر گیا جو وہی نور کائنات بنا، سمٹ گیا تو اسی کو حسین کہتے ہیں. سمٹ گیا تو اسی کو حسین کہتے ہیں. محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. اور ایک اور کلام آپ کی سماعتوں کی نظر، یہ کافی سنا کلام ہے تو آپ کی غور سے سماعت فرمائیں. ایک اور بلند ہم مدح علی میں دار پہ بھی لفظوں کو روانی دیتے ہیں. ہم مدح علی میں دار پہ بھی لفظوں کو روانی دیتے ہیں. کٹتی ہے زبان کٹ جائے مگر پیغام زبانی دیتے ہیں. کہ شاہد ہے ادائے میسم بھی ہم ہیں وہ علی کے دیوانے. ہاں شاہد ہے ادائے میسم بھی ہم ہیں وہ علی کے دیوانے. جس پیڑ پہ پھانسی لگنی ہو اس پیڑ کو پانی دیتے ہیں. ہم مدح علی میں دار پہ بھی لفظوں کو روانی دیتے ہیں. کہ پیشانی حر پر یہ کہہ کر رومال کو باندھا سرور نے. ہاں پیشانی حر پر یہ کہہ کر رومال کو باندھا سرور نے. جنت بھی فدا ہو جائے گی ہم ایسی نشانی دیتے ہیں. ہم مدح علی میں دار پہ بھی لفظوں کو روانی دیتے ہیں. کہ قربان ہوئے جب رن میں حبیب پیغام دیا دنیا کو عجیب. پیشانی قربان ہوئے جب رن میں حبیب پیغام دیا دنیا کو عجیب. ہم اپنی ضعیفی کے بدلے مذہب کو جوانی دیتے ہیں. کہ عباس کی تربت کے ہی قریب پانی نے ٹھہر کر بتلایا. عباس کی تربت کے ہی قریب پانی نے ٹھہر کر بتلایا. میں بہتا ہوں عباس مجھے جب اذن روانی دیتے ہیں میں بہتا ہوں باس مجھے جب اذن روانی دیتے ہیں. آخری شعر کی نظر کہ عباس نے پانی دریا کو چلو سے پلا کر بتلایا. عباس نے پانی دریا کو چلو سے پلا کر بتلایا. مٹھی میں ہے کوثر ہم مٹھی میں ہے کوثر ہم خود ہی دریاؤں کو پانی دیتے ہیں. کٹتی ہے زباں کٹ جائے مگر پیغام زبانی دیتے ہیں. ہم مدح علی میں دار پہ بھی لفظوں کو روانی دیتے ہیں. بر محمد والے محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. اسی کے ساتھ میں آغاز سے گزارش کرنا کہ
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. مؤمنين مؤمنات, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be able to serve your community as we celebrate and commemorate the birth anniversary of our 11th Holy Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So for tonight, I thought I'd just share maybe one story about something that took place in his life. And although we're here to commemorate and celebrate the life of the Imam, it's tough to remove the zulm and the mazlumiyat that took place to him. All of our Imams, they tried to do what they could during their times, but as you see it progressively, from the time of Imam Ali post Saqifa, as you get closer and closer to the ghaiba, the situation of the Imams was getting worse and worse and worse. When you get to the time, from the 7th, 8th, and then especially 9th, 10th, 11th, there is almost zero contact with the Shias, at least openly. We know they're placed under house arrest, they're constantly harassed, they're being oppressed, the Shias are being killed and slaughtered. It was a very, very difficult time for the Shias. And people, sometimes when we look at the history of these later Imams, we want stories, we want guidelines, we want to use them as role models. But that zulm that was done to the Imams continues on even to us as their Shias, because there's barely anything that we actually have about them. People ask, tell me this about the 11th Imam, tell me about this and this and this, these different qualities. Give me his characteristics, tell me some stories. If you look in our books of history, compared to, we have volumes about Imam Ali, and about Imam Hasan, Imam Hussein, all these other Imams, we have a lot of works. Unfortunately, when we get to the later Imams, especially the 11th, maybe a few pages at most. We don't have that much. But just from that scarcity of the information that was given, there still is so much basirat and hikmat and wisdom that we can still take some good lessons from there. So I wanted to share a story, and then maybe we can analyze it at the end, inshallah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the time of the Imam, because we know openly he couldn't really do much. And I think sometimes we don't even understand how bad it was. In other times, the Shias could generally have sit-downs and gatherings with their Imam. Generally speaking, not too openly, but it wasn't a big deal. It got so bad at the time of the 11th Imam that when he was taken to this area, and he's pulled to Samarra in that area, being constantly spied, right? In his houses there were spies. Around the street there were guards. Everybody was watching his every single move. Whenever he would leave the house and go walk, maybe to the masjid, maybe to the bazaar, whatever he was doing, there were people watching him from every single side. But not just that, they were watching who was interacting with this person too. Who was interacting with the Imam. Because the Abbasids at that point, they knew that these Shias have an underground network. We have to figure out who's part of it and then take them out right away. So sometimes what happened where the Imam would just be walking down the street. A Shia would see the Imam from a distance and want to come to him and give his salams. Something very simple. But the Imam, one story is that somebody was passing by. The Imam saw him from far off, and he saw that he started to come towards him, getting ready to say salam. Right? And of course, if you're getting ready to say salam to the Imam, it's not going to be the normal way that you and I say salam to each other, like assalamu alaikum, and then we're done, we're gone. No, you're saying salam to the Imam, you're going to show your mahabbat and love and everything. So if that were to happen, and one of the spies were to see that, that person would be done. So when the Imam notices this individual, he motions and he tells him, no, don't do that. He goes like this. And the person just turns and keeps on walking. Shias couldn't even greet and send salams to their Imam at that time. We're such privileged Shias right now. Yes, we're disconnected from our Imam, the 12th Imam. But we recite our dua faraj, we can go and have our programs openly, generally speaking. We can spread our love and express our love of the Ahlul Bayt. And we are cut off from the Imam. They were right in front of the Imam and they couldn't do anything. They couldn't sit down, ask questions, nothing. Because constantly they were being watched. So because of that, the Imam had to be very secretive about his actions. And be very, very controlling about who does he let into his house. Who comes and listens to the durus and the dars and the lessons that he's going to give. Who is he taking letters from? Who is his messenger? Right? All these things were very, very controlled. And there was a lot of different activities, from some basic activities that the Imam would undertake, but there were underground activities. Obviously, one of the main things that all Shias should do, and especially at that time, because the Shias were sanctioned, they had a lot of economic difficulties. So what the Imam had to do, just like his grandfathers and his ancestors, is they set up their zakat and khums network very secretly. So they would collect it, and the Imam would give orders to disperse it to certain Shias in certain areas. All this happened very, very secretly. So economics was one thing that the Imam was involved in, but again, very sort of secretively. Even in terms of something like ta'aleem, education, ta'allum. He had to make sure when questions and answers were coming, when people were asking questions about the Quran and tafsir and fiqh things, he had to make sure that that information wasn't going everywhere. Even more importantly is he had to be very, very certain about the level of his students. And that's something that sometimes you and I maybe don't understand, right? So let me share this story now. If you can recite it, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So according to one report, there was a philosopher, Muslim philosopher, during the time of the 11th Imam, who was named Abu Yusuf ibn Ishaq al-Kindi, sometimes just called al-Kindi. There's been many philosophers with the name al-Kindi. We don't know if he was the famous one that many people say or somebody different. So somebody who again lived in Iraq, so he was around that same area of the Imam. But he didn't have any direct connections necessarily, according to some. At that point, his philosophy, this person al-Kindi, his philosophical and logical reasoning had led him to believe that there was tanaqudat and contradictions within the Quran. So he used rational, logical principles. He said, look, I'm reading the Quran and there's some things that don't really make sense here. There are contradictions here. So we started compiling all of this together and was getting ready to publish this book, Tanaqudat al-Quran, or Tanaqudat fil Quran. All of the contradictions that exist in the Quran. And this was going to be a big issue. Right? If this was going out to be published, Islam would have been done. People, right now Muslims end up becoming ex-Muslims because they read some of this stuff online and they leave right away. It's a tough thing. Anyway, so this person was a teacher of Muslims too. He wasn't just some random philosopher. He had dars, he was teaching. So some of these Shi'as were his students. And at one point they decided to take a trip to go and visit our beloved Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala. And Imam al-Askari, through his own network, knew what was going on. He knew of this philosopher, and he knew that the fact that his students were not responding to him. So when these students came and greeted the Imam and said salam, after the ta'arufat and all that stuff was done, he said, why is it that none of you are replying to this teacher of yours? He's speaking about contradictions in the Quran. Why aren't you giving him jawab? Why aren't you replying and refuting him? Are you my Shia or not? What are you doing? How can you let somebody openly talk about the Quran like this and write a book? So this Shia says, what are we supposed to do? We're his students, right? We have to show respect and ihtiram. But yeah, obviously that's correct. He said, but what am I supposed to say to him? What do? We don't know what to do. He's at a higher level than us. We don't know what to say. He said, okay, fine. I understand you need to show ihtiram. You don't want to call out the mistakes of your teacher. Okay, sure, I get that. He said, if I give you a script, if I give you a dialogue, a question and answer, will you be able to memorize it and then go back and verbatim say this to your teacher? The exact way I instruct you. They said, yeah, of course. Yabna Rasulullah, do it. Tell us what you want us to say and we'll go and say it. I said, okay, fine. So he says, look, as soon as you go back, I'm going to give you the script. I want you to recite this. So he said that, look, before you go and start refuting and asking questions, I want you to first make sure that you build a close connection with your teacher first. Don't just be some random person sitting in the back and start objecting to your teacher. Build closeness, build familiarity, become close to him, right? Show respect, show ihtiram, do that. He said, finally, after you do all of that and he sees you as one of his proper students, then I want you to say these things to him. Say to him that, tell your teacher that, Ya Ustad, oh teacher, a problem has come up for me. And the teacher will say, okay, well, what's your problem? I'm your teacher, I'll help you. He said, well, he's like, is it possible that the author of the Quran, yani Allah, is it possible that the author of the Quran means something other than what we understand from it? Allah saying something in the Quran, you and I, we understand something from it. Is it possible Allah means one thing, but we understood something else? He's like, is that possible? He said, and Imam is narrating the thing. He said, yeah, your Ustad will say, of course that's possible, right? He said, okay. He says, once he tells you it's possible, he said, okay, fine. He said, then how are you so certain, when you're compiling all these contradictions, how do you actually know what's going on in Allah's mind and the contradictions that you're getting is actually what Allah intended? How can you be so certain of that? He said, if you say this to your teacher, then you'll see that he'll reply and say, yes, you're right, I have to rethink what these objections that I have of the Quran, I have to rethink this. He said, if your teacher, I know him, he's honest, he's humble, this is the conclusion that he'll reach if you go say that verbatim to him. If you present it the exact way I told you, this Q&A, the same dialogue, he is humble enough, he's smart enough, he's wise enough, he'll be aware of this point and he'll come to his senses. So the student says, okay, no problem. Student goes back, returns to his teacher, they jump in the class, he does just as the Imam instructs. He doesn't just ask the questions right away. He builds closeness, familiarity, shows respect and ihtiram to his teacher. And then asks, as the Imam told him, he asked his teacher one day, is it possible, Ustad, is it possible that a narrator or an author or a person can relate something, tell a story, or try to give information, and they intend one thing, but the listener and the audience, the mukhatabin, they understand something else. So when the teacher hears this, he says, okay. He thinks for a few seconds. He stops, he says, repeat your question again. So the student repeats the question. He says, okay. He thought for a few minutes. He said, what you're saying is definitely mumkin. It's definitely possible. Yeah. And he starts thinking again. He said, you know what? Yes, it's possible that a muhaddith or a narrator or an author or a writer or a speaker, they have something in their mind. They have a niyat or a maqsad or a matlab. They have something in their mind. They want to express it and get it out. And it's possible that everybody listening, they understand something different than what the actual speaker or person intended. He said, yeah, you're right. I said, okay, I see that. I see what you're getting at. He said, okay. He said, hold on a second, wait. Before we continue this, he said, I want you to tell me the truth. Teacher is telling this Shia student. How did this question come to your mind? Where did this question come from? And the student said, why couldn't just, I get ilham or something, why didn't it just come to me naturally? What do you mean, where did I get the question from? And the teacher says, look, I am your teacher, you are my student, I know you intimately. I know that it's way too early in your ta'aleem and ta'allum. There's no way you can think of a question like this. This is way too advanced for you to have thought of this idea. You got this from somewhere else. Tell me the truth, where did this question come from? So, after he's pressed, the student says, okay. The reality, the truth of the matter is that Abu Muhammad, who of course is Imam Hasan al-Askari, alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala. He's the one who did what? He's the one who told me this question, and that's why I'm asking it. And he says, aha. He said, such advanced questions can only come from a family like this. Such advanced questions can only come from a family such as the family of Ali Muhammad. There's no other way it's possible. So the teacher then, after thinking about it, deliberating, realizing he made a mistake, he told everybody, he said, okay, grab some firewood, put a fire together. So they did as he said, they put a fire together. He grabbed all of those copies and manuscripts, everything, all of his notes that he had written down, he had spent countless amounts of hours and hours writing these contradictions, he took everything and tossed it in the fire. Right? The minute he figured out that he's been making a big mistake and that this is not something he should be spreading, immediately he burned all that work right away. Right? So there's a few things that I want to maybe just open up and we can take some lessons inshaAllah. You can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The first point I think in the story which for me stuck out, which is interesting, is the expectations of the Imam of his Shia. Right? Shia's coming in, this person's coming in expecting the Imam, I don't know what kind of conversation he's expecting, but the Imam right away is saying, how come you're not giving jawab to your teacher? What's wrong with you? What are you doing? So the Imam has a very specific expectation about our educational level. We shouldn't be people who are, sitting there, kind of, with our hands behind our backs or our hands tied. When people come and give us shak and shakiyat and doubts all over the place, we're like, oh, I don't know what to do now. Everybody's being misguided, we're all lost. Who's going to answer these people? If you're a real Shia, you should be able to give jawab to anybody. Whether it's somebody from within our own folds, another Shia, whether it's a Sunni, whether it's an atheist, Christian, Jew, I don't care who it is, you should be able to reply to their objections. Or whatever questions they have. If you're a true Shia, then you should be able to do that. We have an interesting hadith from the Imam where he says, Al-Jahl khasam. Ignorance, khasam, literally meaning it's violence, it's harmful, it's devastating. Nowadays everybody says that, words are violence, right? That's what the sort of woke police talk about right now, right? That, words are violence. Well, Imam's saying, no, it's not that's violence. Your ignorance is actually what's harmful and detrimental to a society. Because one jahil can ruin everything. You can have a group of ulama come and say whatever they want. One jahil can ruin that, right? That happens too. Sometimes you're in a group and everybody's sort of on this high spiritual level. Sometimes this happens in our ziyarat groups too. When you go for ziyarat, you have a good time, you go to the haram, you connect, you come back and maybe you're sitting around for breakfast, lunch, dinner or something. One jahil that's sitting at the table says something dumb and it ruins everything there. All that work you've put in kind of messes everything up, right? One jahil can kind of ruin everything. Now, this responsibility about being an educated Shia, it rests not just on us as Shias, meaning the students of the Imams or the ulama, but it also comes on the shoulders of the ulama themselves, obviously, right? The job of an alim is to be able to alim. They should be a teacher. They have to be able to teach. Yes, we need reminders, we need to hear fada'il. Yeah, that's all in its right place, we need that. But we also need to get to a stage where we're not being bombarded so much from the outside, or even sometimes from within, and we then end up losing our iman because of that. Because if that's the case, then what value does your iman actually have? What's the point of your iman if anybody who comes, one single WhatsApp forward, or one random 5-minute clip on YouTube and you're done? What kind of iman is that? The Imams were always training strong Shias. And they had specific ashab, especially during the time of the 5th and 6th Imams. Specific ashab would go and debate specific people. Right? Hisham ibn Hakam, right? One of the famous ones. He said, look, Hisham, you excel. I want you to go and debate people using these tactics. And the Imams would go and encourage this. So they would debate Khawarij and the people, of the Hanafi branch or whatever it was. They'd go and debate them. And they would succeed. The Imams wouldn't even need to get involved because they trained their ashab that well. Now, if we're students of Karbala, students of the Shia, students of the Imams, well, we should be, at least to some regard. Look, I'm not saying, jump on social media and start getting into some Twitter battle. I'm not saying doing anything like that. Definitely don't do that. But at least, if somebody brings up some issue to you, you can at least say, okay, I don't know the answer. The first thing I need to do then is let me go do some tahqiq and research then. Let me figure it out. Don't just let some shak and some doubt just sit in your mind. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Some people, when we talk about this stuff, they complain. They say, look, Hasan, we want to raise our iman, we want to be educated, there's a lot of different topics. We want to know more about histories of the Imams. We want to know more about, let's say, arguments against the atheists, maybe some polemical stuff against Sunnis. There's a whole list of things we need to learn, all of us do. Yeah, Hasan, I know that, but I don't have time. I got work, 9 to 5, or maybe even more than that. I come home, I'm tired. I can't sit down and read a book, right? I gotta watch the game. It's not gonna work like that. Okay, what am I supposed to do? So this is where we look at the advice of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. He's reported to have said, Man lam yasbir ala al-madad al-ta'aleem ta'allum. Whoever is not willing to have sabr on that path of ta'aleem and ta'allum, if you're not willing to put in the blood, sweat and tears, then baqiya fi dhulli jahl. Then guaranteed you're going to be a jahil for the rest of your life. You're done. You're going to be zalil. If you're not willing to put in the effort and the work, you're signing up to become a jahil for the rest of your life. Imam is teaching us, look, when you signed up for the Shia path, whether you were born into it or otherwise, you became a reborn Shia, whatever it is, or now you're focusing what? I was with the cultural stuff for many years, but now I'm waking up a little bit more, and I realize I need something more, some more punch to my Shiism. Okay, good. Well, know that the path of Shiism ain't easy. There's nothing more difficult than being a Shia. And Shias always have this question too. If we're the people who are Ahl Haqq, if we have Haqq in our hands, we're the ones who have things right, then shouldn't we be getting all the blessings? Shouldn't we be the ones who are the most popular, have power and wealth and all this stuff throughout the world? Why is it the Shia seem to be doing the worst throughout the world? Right? And there's a whole discussion about divine justice and adl ilahi about that, which I don't want to get into. But we have very clear from our riwayat that look, when you sign up, when you decide that you want to express the love for Ali and Fatima and Hasan and Hussein and Ali Muhammad, if you want to do that, and they say, look, you better get ready for fitnas, you better get ready for people to come after you. This is not an easy path. Everybody else, yeah, some people, they have a faith where you can say, look, you can believe God is 3 in 1 or 1 in 3, or he can be a human and sleeps and does all this stuff, and you just believe that he's the son of God and you're done. That's it. Your faith is, there's nothing else to do. There's no fiqh for Christians. They don't have any work to do. Just believe in Jesus and you're done. That's easy. Or if you want to be a Scientologist, that's easy too. You just pay to play, right? Just pay and you keep going up. What is it? I forgot what it's called. What are those apps, the term they use for apps, like games and stuff? Yeah, pay to win. That's what Scientology is, right? Although some people say that's what khums is. I'm like, no, that's not what khums is, man. Don't mix things up. That's not how khums works. So, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's okay, it's Wiladat, we can tell a few jokes, it's not a big deal, right? It's okay. Anyway, so the Imam is saying, look, if you are signing up to be a person of haqq, then you have to put in the work to get to haqq. Yes, if you want to do the bare minimum, Allah's Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Ghafur, Al-Ghafar, stick to the bare minimum, Allah will take you to heaven too, no problem. Shias are guaranteed Jannat, we all know that. But don't forget, we're all guaranteed Jannat, but that doesn't mean that the barzakh is guaranteed, that your qabr is guaranteed, and doesn't mean your dunya is guaranteed. All those things, the Ahlul Bayt have said, look, we are afraid for what might happen in your barzakh and your qabr because of some of the ma'siyat and guna and the jahalat that you may have been doing. Alright, so we have to be ready. This is not supposed to be some, drive-through McDonald's ideology and philosophy where, nowadays people want, I want 1 minute, I want you to give me the philosophy of hijab. What? In a minute, you want me to tell you about the philosophy of hijab? Yeah, all these things going on in Iran. I want you to explain everything, but I only have 2 minutes. What are you talking about, man? I have to give you ilm siyasat first. I have to teach you about Islamic politics first. Then I have to tell you about the hikmat of hijab. Then I have to tell you about Islamic enforcement of these rules and all the different opinions. Like, what do you mean 2 minutes? Just for me to explain the mawdu and the subject matter is going to take me at least 2, maybe 5, 10 lessons. We can't be looking for this fast food Islam. It's not going to work like that. Now luckily we have, statements like this from the Ahlul Bayt, stories that exist like this, and that's the point why we get together. We get these kind of quick little boosts, but the point of the boost is that you take that boost, that catalyst, and you go home and you do something with it, right? That's the whole point. You go for ziyarat, you see the imams, you feel the nur of the imams, you take that and you come back home and you're like, okay, let me build off of that, let me do something with it. We have these centers too. They're made, we have these jashns and these programs, our energy builds up from it. We say, okay, let me go home, let me do something with this now. Right? It's like somebody, who takes a Red Bull or has an energy drink, and they go to the gym and they just sit there on their phone all the time. Like, what are you doing, man? You're wasting your time. That's not the point. You're getting hyped up, you're getting the energy so you lift more or have more energy, whatever it is. Don't just go there and start, scrolling. That's not the point. Okay. So this was one lesson. Let's jump to the second one. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. By the way, I didn't ask in terms of how long I should go. No, don't say that. Do you know when turban heads jump on this thing, the watch stops, right? There's no such thing. There's no time anymore. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr. Be very, very careful of that. No, because I'm used to being cut off at like 30 minutes, so I don't want to take too much more time, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, first lesson was what? Imam expects Shias to put in effort. Be educated, be able to respond. Right? Okay, no matter who it is. And then responsibility falls on both you ulama shoulders and you and I too. Right? We have to, it's two ways, right? We have to take care of that. The second, which I think is really important, is when the Imam is instructing this student on what to say, he doesn't just say, hey, I want you to go guns a-blazing, run up to your teacher and just start battering him with questions. He says, no, show ihtiram, show respect, show love and compassion and kindness, become close with your teacher, then you can go ahead. Right? They say, stroke the ego, then you strike, right? That's the idea. And sometimes, we miss out on that too. We forget that, this deen, which is hubb and muhabbat, sometimes we forget that part, right? Yeah, we got the la'nat and all that stuff too. I'm not discounting any of that. But as the Imam says, hal ad-din illa al-hubb wal-bughl, right? Hubb is a huge part of the deen. That's why Allah says 113 times, I need you to remember Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim more than any other names that exist. Yeah, Allah has infinite names, 99 Asma al-Husna. But two of these, Allah is saying, I want you to keep saying them over and over and over again. Because these ones are your SOP, your standard operating procedures. That's how you have to function in life. Even with your enemies, you have to at least start off like this. Yes, if they show and they push back, then yeah, we switch to, the Dhul Fiqar mode. Yeah, you can switch to that later on. But, we take, calm, loving steps initially. So whether we're the students or we're the teachers, or we're the parents or grandparents or anybody who's involved in these processes, especially those of us who are all, elders and trying to help inculcate and guide the youth, right, everybody's favorite phrase, we have to make sure we're doing it with love and compassion, right? If it's going to be us just, screaming down and saying, do this, you're going to go to hell otherwise, that's not going to work. Imams didn't do that, we shouldn't be doing stuff like that either, right? We know that this whole, you're going to go to hell if X, Y, Z happens, is not going to work. This hellfire and brimstone stuff, that's for other deens, it ain't for us. That's not the message that Allah is trying to get across, right? Allah says in the Quran, Sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadaba, or we read in Dua Kumail as well, right? Allah's rahmah has sibqat. It comes before, it has precedence before His ghadaba, before His anger. Is I'm going to be merciful and loving and kind to you 1,000,000 and infinite times more than before I even touch my anger before I come to you. Right? That's the way that Allah says, that's the way I'm dealing with you. You have to do the same. You know, it's interesting because when we think about the Allah that we want in our lives, we want that Allah that's Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim and Al-Latif and nice and kind and loving. We come to Him on the Day of Judgment, on Qiyamah, and say, Allah, I know I messed up a lot, but come on, I came, I did, Zadari, I did all this stuff, come on, help me out here. Allah will say, okay, sure, no problem, we'll take care of you. But when it comes to people we don't like, when it comes to our enemies, like, Allah, I want you to remember, you take, al-muntaqim, you take revenge on people, you've got hellfire, you gotta throw them over there. Like, hold on a second. Why is it the Allah that you want is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, but for everybody else, no, they have to burn in hell forever, internally. The way that you and I act with other people is the exact same type of Allah that we'll see on the Day of Judgment. The wajh Allah, that face of Allah, the way that we act, Allah says, look, this individual, an angry one, just looking out for, blood everywhere you went, starting fights and fitnas, well, it's going to be a big fitna here in hellfire for you. It's going to be tough. If it's the other way around, He said, no, I saw that you were showing love and compassion and mercy to my makhluqat, then this is what you deserve too. You deserve better than that because you were manifesting my names. That's what I wanted you to do and you were doing that. That's what you accomplished. So what we're saying here is that in this process of ta'aleem and ta'allum and tarbiyat and all of this stuff, love has to be that first major principle. Right? I'm not saying completely open, let people do whatever they want. No, that's not the idea. Because nowadays people are saying love is love. No, that's not what I mean, obviously. But when we're teaching our young kids, when we're dealing, especially, you know the riwayat better than I do, in that 0 to 7 phase of the children, they're supposed to be the Sayyid of the house, the Malik of the house. They get to call the shots, right? We go with love and mahabbat. Not sometimes us, we don't rule with love, we rule with the chappal, right? That's not the way it's supposed to work. Right? We have to be very, very kind and gentle to our young children. Because if not, then they're going to become those same zalimeen and very, very strict when they get older, or worse off, because of that sort of, as they call it, trauma that they get when they're younger. When they get older, then they'll either do the same thing to their kids, or they end up saying, look, Allah, the God that's in my fitrah, was a loving one. You introduce some hateful God to me, I don't want any part of this. And they leave Islam altogether. This happens, unfortunately, sometimes. If you don't believe me, go read the blogs, and I'm not saying you have to, but if you want to go find out why ex-Muslims become ex-Muslims, go see why it happened. What do they normally describe? Sunday school teachers. They say, this uncle or this auntie was vicious. I asked a question, this one famous ex-Muslim said, I asked my Sunday school teacher some questions, and they said, you're not allowed to ask questions, what's wrong with you? How dare you? Stuff like this. So we have to be very, very careful of that and make sure that we develop familiarity with one another before we go and start correcting and yelling and screaming and doing all this stuff. And of course, we have to actually make sure we know what we're saying to somebody before we try to teach them in the first place, right? Half the people that want to go teach somebody about something, they end up not knowing the fatwa in the first place. After this post Roe v. Wade sort of stuff that happened, every single Muslim, and Shia specifically, had their own opinion about abortion and abortion rights and laws and this and that. And nearly every single person, whenever they would come and ask me what our opinion should be, I'd ask them first, because usually they would want to tell me their opinion first. I said, okay, you tell me, what's the Islamic stance on it? What's the actual fatwa about abortion? And nearly every single person got it wrong. Every single person. Right? It was really bad. So if we're going to do that, you want to start educating people, make sure you yourself have become properly educated. We're going to end with maybe one more hadith, and it's I think the most important principle of all. And as we said before so far, that the Imam has expectations that we're educated people, that educated Shias. Second, that we show love and compassion in our journey with our teachers, and if we're the teachers or guiders, then we're doing the same for our students or people who are younger than us. And the third and final one is this, is we have to be able to recognize that not everybody is a qualified teacher or speaker and somebody I should be taking my ilm from in the first place. Let's look at this final hadith from Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. In this hadith, the Imam is describing the characteristics of the ulama is-su, evil ulama, evil scholars. He says, وَهُمْ أَضَرُّوا عَلَى الضُّعَفَاءِ شِيعَتِنَا. He says that these evil scholars, these evil ulama is-su, that they cause more zarar, they cause more harm to the du'afa, the zaif among our Shias. not just any Shia, but the weak ones. He said they cause more harm to our Shias than what? Min jayshi Yazid ala al-Husayn ibn Ali wa ashab. He said these ulama isu are more harmful, more detrimental and worse, and cause more harm to the weak Shias than Yazid's army had done to Imam Hussein and his ashab. Can you imagine a statement like that? There's nobody worse in our books than Yazid. And Imam is saying, no, there are people worse. When it's these ulama isu coming and doing certain things. Well, how do we know? Imam is going to give us the characteristics. First he explains, because somebody, even us, we hear this like, this hadith sounds very strange. How could these ulama isu be worse than Yazid? So first Imam gives his reason, then gives the characteristics. He says, فَإِنَّهُمْ يَسْلَبُونَهُمْ الْأَرْوَاحِ وَالْأَمْوَالِ. He said, look, what Yazid and his army and his followers, what they did is that they took away and they stole the arwah, the souls, and the amwal, the property. Meaning, yes, they harmed and killed people, right? Imam Hussein and his ashab, and he took their property. So that's what they did. He said, but وَهَؤُلَاءِ عُلَمَاءِ السُّوءِ. What about the ulama isu? What do they do? What makes them worse? يُدْخَلُونَ الشَّكْ وَالشُّبْهَ عَلَى ضُعَفَاءِ أَشْيَتَنَا وَيُضِلُونَهُمْ. They do idkhal and they put shak and shubha in our Shias, in the weak Shias. They make them doubt and weaken their iman. And when that happens, يُضِلُونَهُمْ. This makes them move away from the path. This makes them digress and not figure out what's their life's purpose about. And this is, I don't think a hadith that is just relevant to the past. We are clearly having this sort of issue right now, where anybody with any sort of social media account, and we have certain speakers and scholars who have their own social media teams. They have teams that do marketing on their behalf. Many of you don't know that, but they market for them. And they have these wonderful videos and these hilarious tweets and all this stuff, which is very attractive to a lot of young people and even some adults. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. These quick little 5-minute clips about fiqh issues and whatever. Like, oh, this is great. And it's sad, unfortunately, that a lot of times these individuals, they take a certain topic. Why? Because they want to create shak in the Shias. Right? When they call into question, let me call into question Ziyarat Ashura, for example. Is it authentic or not? And they throw that under the bus. What about this whole idea of tawassul? Is it real or not? They throw that under the bus. There are some speakers out there who are saying, there's not really evidence for Imam Mahdi. I'm sure you guys are aware of this kind of stuff. Shia speakers, so-called scholars, or academics, whatever you want to call them. They're going constantly and just inserting the stuff, right? Just freely to everybody. Now, look, am I saying everything that they're saying is wrong? Not necessarily. Like 99% is. But the point is this, why are they going around to the general public and relaying all this information? What other person, in what other discipline does anybody do that? Have you ever seen, let's say, somebody with a PhD in astrophysics come and say, I want to give you the latest theory about black holes and white holes to some general crowd? No, they don't do that. They say, I'm going to do this in an academic environment, right? I'm going to go there. And in university, I'm going to relay my theories so that people who have PhDs, they can come back and tell me what makes sense or if my theory is nonsense. The only reason somebody would come and give out these new theories and new ideas and create doubts and bring up all this new and novel stuff is if they want to say, hey, I know that you weak Shias, I know that you will be subject to whatever I say, especially if I'm a great speaker, especially if I have a British accent. People like, come on. I'm not going to beat a British accent. I got a Jersey accent. It doesn't stack up. It's tough. People have great oratory power and skill, and it's captivating. But the stuff that comes out of their mouth is nonsense. General people, they have no idea what's going on. Yes, people have been trained, and unfortunately, I've had to sift through some of these speeches sometimes. People will send me clips, or watch this lecture, or look at this person's article, and I'm like, okay, fine. So I look through all this stuff, and just from the first sentence, I'm like, okay, there comes my red pen or my red marker. This is just nonsense. Their presumptions and assumptions are all wrong. The muqaddamat are problematic. Of course the conclusions and then the nata'ij are going to be problematic. But only people who have, let's say, been trained properly, especially those who have been to the hawza, they've been trained for this kind of stuff. Not some person who, of course, it's an honor to be somebody who's by a minbar and been sitting and listening to the faza'il of the Ahlul Bayt and the history and gaining akhlaqi advice. Yeah, that's great. But that doesn't put people in the position where they can start sifting through all the different theories that are out there. And how's that going to happen? And the place that it does happen is the hawza itself. You have this akhbari, usuli stuff. Yeah, that battle was killed a long time ago. The ulama figured it out. The usulis won, and that's why we're usulis right now. Or this battle of is irfan and falsafa, is it shirk or not? The battle was fought, and you see, irfan and falsafa, they won basically, right? Some people don't like to, that's fine, it's okay, you don't have to, but at least generally you said it's an accepted way of approaching things, right? So you see the ulama, they deal with this stuff, right? And nowadays, what you see is certain speakers, they bring out this idea of, use your intuition, use your rational mind, and think these things through. The Quran, that was something for those Jahil Arabs back then. You and I, we've progressed, we've moved forward, we've evolved throughout time, right? We're different. You and I can figure things out. What about, human free will? What about that? What about the karamat of insan, right? They have all these buzzwords. That humans have this existential power. They say all this kind of stuff. Wow, big words. 5-6 syllable words, so nice. And they'll try to bring up ayat of the Quran, right? أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ. Allah says, think about things. So maybe if we think about hijab, maybe we'll think that, maybe it's not wajib anymore. And then therefore what they're doing in Iran is also going to be a problem too, etc. They start building up arguments like this. And then people who are listening, right, those of us, I grew up here too, right, in the West. When we don't have strong foundations, and somebody comes and says, yeah, you can use your aql, use your rational mind and figure things out. Okay, fine, I can think. I have a mind, I have a brain. Right? It's a way to boost somebody's ego. Don't you have a brain? Can't you use it? Yeah, I can use it, yeah. And you start using it, and you start making your own conclusions. It's a very, very dangerous trap. No, we're not saying throw out your aql. That's not the point. We're not the blind faith deen. Other deens, yeah, maybe they do that. We are the deen of the uqala. We use our aql, definitely. But the way that the aql is supposed to be used, and its limits and all that, that's been mentioned to us and taught to us by the Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, right? That's what taqalain is for. They said, look, this is how the aql is actually used. These are the limits. Don't think that you can just go out and use your brain and say, well, since it doesn't make sense, why, like I'll give you an example, right? Where some people say, well, back then, because they had to use, camels and horses to travel long distances, that's why there's a specific distance meant for qasr prayers. Obviously, we have cars and planes and things like that. So the distance has to change now because times have changed. Like, so you just did a dars kharij in 10 seconds of thinking about it? You think that's how it works? No, there's a lot more discussion there. You think the ulama haven't thought about that? There's whole pages and pages and pages about that specific point. So we ask these people, have you read through any of this? Do you know the definition? Do you know that? No, there's a whole reason perhaps that you haven't thought of about why that's the case. Right? So every single issue that might come about, again, going back to the same stuff we've talked about, there's so much at stake here. There's so much to research. And that's not something I'm saying to scare you or to make it seem overwhelming. In fact, it should actually make us say, subhanallah, that there's an infinite ocean available for us of knowledge. Right? Obviously, if we're trying to get more ma'rifat of Allah and His Ahlul Bayt, and Allah is the infinite, the Ahlul Bayt are infinitely manifesting Allah's names. If we're on this journey to understand them, when is it going to end? It's never going to end. It's one of the initial mistakes that I made when I was younger too, when I first got into the hawza, is I thought I'm just going to get the answers and I'll be satisfied. And that was my mistake. Because when I got there, they said, look, we're not just going to give you an answer that is going to close everything off for you. It's going to close all the doors for you. We're going to give you an answer the same way the A'immah did. We'll give you an answer that will open 1,000 more doors, 70,000 more doors, over and over again. We also have to make sure that we are the ones who are ready to handle this kind of stuff. All right, I'll leave with one other story, inshallah, and then we'll be done for tonight. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Everybody wants to know, or they think that they have the isti'dad, the qabiliyat, that yes, I'm an intellectual, I want to do all this research or think about things and sit around and give my opinions about moon sighting and unity and all this kind of stuff. Like, okay, hold on, slow down a second. Is that actually the case or not? You see, even amongst the ashab and the Shias and the companions, there were differing grades and maqamat and darajat. They weren't all the same. Not everybody got the exact same information from the Ahlul Bayt. People got different. Some people got, simple, be good to your parents, and that was it, they were done. Some people, they came to the Imams or the Prophet, they said, okay, what do we do? Give charity. Be nice to your wife. Be nice to your husband, right? And that's it, they would go and they'd be done. Other people, no, they had depth. But like Abu Dhar or Salman, they were able to handle a lot more. But of course, there was only one individual who was completely able to handle every single thing that was told to him by Rasulullah. The only one individual who was able to handle every single sir, all of the asrar, that came from Allah to Rasulullah was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. So many of these times, the Prophet and the Imam, they would be sitting by themselves in secret having these sort of conversations and discussions. No other people would be around. And one of these events, one historian says that the Imam Ali and Rasulullah were sitting in a tent. And Rasulullah was divulging some of these deep secrets that nobody else should be hearing. So when that happens, at that point, one of the ashab, one of the companions, I'm not going to share his name, you can use your imagination to figure out who it was. He comes walking by and he hears this. He hears the voice of Rasulullah and he hears, vaguely he's hearing some like, oh, amazing stuff. He's like, okay, let me go and jump in this gathering, let me go hear this stuff. Okay, fine. So he gets closer and closer, and as he's walking closer and closer to the tent, now again you can imagine the flaps are closed, right? He's getting closer and closer, so you can imagine the Prophet and the Imam, they're hearing the footsteps. The voice of the Prophet's getting lower and lower and lower. The companion's kind of confused, so he's kind of speeding up, wondering what's going on, and the voice is getting lower and lower and lower. Then finally, Assalamu alaikum, opens the flap, sticks his head inside, sees Rasulullah and Imam Ali. And when he opened the flap and stuck his head inside, complete silence from Rasulullah. So the companion thought it was just, alaikum salam, maybe it's just out of ihtiram, right? The Prophet's just greeting me and whatever. He said, oh, Ya Rasulullah, please don't stop on my account, please continue, right? I'd love to benefit. Rasulullah just says one thing and ends it. He says, honey is harmful for newborn babies. And that's it. He leaves it alone. And if you understood, you understood. If you didn't, then no problem. Recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. These were the same people who decided that, they had enough right, enough information, whatever knowledge they had, we can go run the Islamic empire, we think we know what we're doing. No, you couldn't handle a conversation by the Prophet. The Prophet refused to speak in front of you, right? And you think you can run the Islamic empire, right? So we also have to be careful that we don't have the same sort of arrogance that some of these individuals had. That jahalat, there's nothing worse than two characteristics, right? That's jahl murakkab, is that somebody's a jahil and they have jahalat of the fact that they're a jahil. So they think they know a lot of stuff, and they go around, they give their opinions, and they say so many things, and they might quote you books and names and titles. They say, oh, Bihal al-Anwar mein, yeah. Like, okay, that's great. But how much have you really understood from that, right? Have you been following the same principles that the Ahlul Bayt have left aside? Or are we just kind of grasping at, crumbs over here? Now again, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from research. What I'm trying to say is you're getting involved in this, following the footsteps of the Shi'as of the Imams, the way they really were. The expectation that Imam al-Askari had. If you want to be a part of that network of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah ajidallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Then just remember, again, this is not an easy path. It's a path for people who are willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, to go out, to research, to ask questions, to get answers, who show respect to everybody, especially their teachers, who are showing love and kindness to those who are not at their level yet, and they're trying to teach them. They show love and kindness, right, to children as well, especially. And they know, who should I be taking information from? And maybe, who are some accounts that I need to block or maybe cut out of my feeds, right? We have to be able to figure out these characteristics. If these speakers are causing doubts in basic zururiyat ad-din, the musallamat, the basic stuff that we all grew up with that we know is the case, and these people are just random individuals, then we have to be very careful. Look, I'm not saying don't ask questions. If you have a question about Ziyarat Ashura, ask. You have a question about Tawassul, ask. You have a question about whatever it happens to be, no, it's good to ask. This question about hijab enforcement in Iran, this is a great question to ask. To figure out, okay, what really is the hikmat of hijab? It's a great question for both men and women to ask. Should Islam be enforced in a country? That's a nice question to ask, right? But there's a way of coming about it. There's ihtiram in asking those questions and knowing who to ask. Sometimes people, the way they come, they're like, Mulana Saab, or they'll say, what's wrong with this, or why do we do this? They're very just antagonistic and spiteful and angry when they come at it. Rather than saying, a question occurred to me, I don't know. I'm wondering if you can enlighten me and explain something to me. Right? There's an ihtiram in the way that we should be explaining these things. Inshallah, we ask Allah by the tawfiq and right of Muhammad and ala Muhammad, especially by the haqq of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, to grant us the tawfiq to be able to gain the basirat, the hikmat, to understand the wisdom of the Ahlul Bayt, of the Quran, to be able to figure out what is our duty in this time so that we can support the 12th Imam in his ghaybat and then for his zuhur, inshallah. We ask you to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, all of our marhumeen, marhumat, especially those who have sponsored this program tonight. We ask Allah by the haqq of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad to be able to help us become at an educated level where any of these doubts that are coming in from, whether it's from amongst our own people or from the outside, that we have enough iman that's sabit and strong, where nothing can break that spiritual armor that we would have created, and we become a pride in the eyes of Imam al-Hujjah. Jazakallah once again for your time and your patience and your participation. I appreciate the invitation to be able to recite. Hopefully this was beneficial. If it was, all khair comes from Allah and Allah alone. If there was anything here which was said which was problematic or confusing or offensive or incorrect, anything which was a problem was from me, so I ask for your forgiveness and the ability to correct it if possible, inshallah ta'ala. I hope, inshallah, Allah gives me the tawfiq to one day be able to do khidmat for all of you once again. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin.
लाखों सलाम रूह में इमामत पे लाखों सलाम, जिसकी आमद से काबा भी क़िबला बने, फ़क़्र औलाद आदम पे लाखों सलाम। सारे नबियों की जिसको इमामत मिले, उस इमाम दो आला पे लाखों सलाम, जिसके चेहरे को हक़ अपना चेहरा कहे, नक्श खैरुल मुजस्सम पे लाखों सलाम। मुस्तफ़ा जान ने रहमत पे लाखों सलाम। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। है रब जहाँ पंजतने पाक का सदका, इस कौम का दामन गम शब्बीर से भर दे, बच्चों को अता कर अली असगर का तबस्सुम, बूढ़ों को हबीब इब्ने मज़ाहिर की नज़र दे, कम सिन को मिले वलवले आनो मोहम्मद, हर एक जवां को अली अकबर का जिगर दे, माओं को सिखा सानिया ज़हरा का सलीका, बहनों को सकीना की दुआओं का असर दे। मौला तुझे ज़ैनब की असीरी की कसम है, बेजुर्म असीरों को रिहाई की खबर दे, जो चादर ज़ैनब के आज़ादार है मौला, महफूज रहे ऐसी ख़वातीन के पर्दे, जो दीन के काम आए वो औलाद अता कर, इस मजलिस शब्बीर की खातिर वो गर्दे, हमको कोई गम न दे सिवाए गमे शब्बीर, शब्बीर का गम बांट रहा है तो इधर दे। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दुल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न रसूलिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न अमीरुल मुअमिनीन व इब्न सय्यदिल वसीयीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या फ़ातिमतुज़ ज़हरा सय्यदतु निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس. السلام عليك يا أنيس النفوس. السلام عليك يا مدفون بأرض توس راضيا بالقدر والقضاء. علي بن موسى الرضا روحي وجسمي لك الفداء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي صاحب الأسر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآله